We live in an era when critical thinking has come to be a sort of surrogate virtue. It's the presumed solution to so many of our problems, and whenever we encounter a problem, we attribute it to the shortcomings of the education system and the lack of critical thinking. Don't tell me it's just me, guys. I hear this all the time from the government, from high-level mainstream media, and from low-level YouTubers, columnists, bloggers, personalities like myself who just struggle to make their voices heard in the cacophony of the internet. In contrast to the concept of education, I'd here just like to talk for a minute about encouragement. The video that's coming is heavily laden with scientific facts, and many of you will not watch the whole video. You'll fast forward or just skip the second half of it entirely. I know this. And it's also in part a criticism of the particular personality who's been representing or misrepresenting these facts within the vegan digital demimonde, Carly Taylor. So Carly Taylor is mostly known as the girlfriend of James Aspey, and to my knowledge, she is 23 years old. She has formal education in biomedical sciences. She has formal education in chemistry, in psychology, and that would certainly include the reading of medical literature of this kind and the interpretation of statistics, whether you think of those as social science statistics or statistics as used in medical research, when looking at basically the numbers for how effective drugs are in the outcomes of trials. However, Carly is currently in a romance with a man who teaches meditation, someone who preaches vipassana and a very spiritual, soft, hippie approach to veganism. And it's obvious that she's not being encouraged to think about scientific problems scientifically. She's not being encouraged to think about medical problems medically. Now, this second video on the subject is partly a response to the fact that Melissa was shocked when she learned that Carly had this kind of education. I pointed it out to her, and she suddenly regretted that in her first video, she was so flattering or polite towards Carly. She asked me repeatedly before she uploaded her first video if I thought she wasn't being too mean or too harsh towards Carly in her criticism there. And then when she found out she had this educational background, she said, oh, I should have been much, much harsher on this woman. Now, why is that? What are the assumptions here, and what's the kind of, what's the picture frame that prefigures how we perceive these personalities and the information we receive from them? In recent videos, I've complained at length about celebrity culture devouring politics. We also have a problem of celebrity culture devouring the biomedical sciences. People learning about science and health from celebrities, and in a sense, only learning things they want to learn, only hearing voices they want to hear, and whether they examine it or not, they may be hearing these voices because they have a pretty face, because they're connected to some celebrity they're following, because they agree with them or appeal to them in any number of really irrational and perhaps aesthetic and perhaps rather shallow ways. So this turnaround on my girlfriend's part was partly because of this discovery of really who Carly is. And it's partly also that I read 2 of the peer-reviewed studies that my girlfriend read. She read many more. She did quite a lot of research for this series of videos. And when I was reading them, things leapt out at me. Things seemed salient and important to me that didn't leap out when my girlfriend gave them the first reading. And I said, no. This is really important. This is what you've got to point. This needs attention drawn to it. And again, this is a contrast between education and encouragement. Melissa and Carly are about the same age. They're really, and I know they both have a BA from university. And there are 2 kind of parallel lives here being lived. I'm here with Melissa, and I'm really encouraging her to think, in a more exacting and precise and demanding way, to go over these peer-reviewed studies and check with her. No. Are you sure you caught this? Like, do you see it's saying something here in passing, saying something here briefly, but it's really important. So just to give you a couple of examples, about 9 minutes into this video, I can give a timestamp. The number 10 comes up. 10 pregnancies, at least 10 pregnancies that weren't included in the analysis of the report. So, minimum of 10. And I said, no, this is mentioned briefly, but this is really important. It's important for a number of reasons. One of them being that that's the kind of tangible number ordinary people can relate to. You're not talking about an abstract problem of methodology, procedure, or philosophy or something in how this is structured. But you're saying, no, look, there were at least 10 pregnancies that were omitted in calculating the rate of pregnancy that results using this form of birth control. And there was another one that popped out at me, which was actually reading a separate peer-reviewed article that's not discussed in this video. I was going through it, and it briefly gave you what the actual definition of perfect use was, because they talk about imperfect use and then mixed methods. And in each report, that needs to be pinned down exactly what's meant by those terms. And in this particular report I was reading, perfect use involved a median of 12 days of abstinence per cycle. So that means you're reviewing this as a form of quote-unquote birth control in which women are not having any vaginal intercourse for the perfect use statistic, not having any vaginal intercourse for 12 out of 25 days. The number of days in the cycles vary, right? You always look at average and median for that too. They could have a 30-day cycle. They could have a 22-day cycle. It varies from woman to woman. It can vary from month to month. And the number 12 is not the maximum. You could have women who are having no sex at all for 15 days out of 30 days. These are really glaring problems that are buried in the methodology.
People who went to camp will know this. Swimming in the swimming pool. When days are hot, when days are cold.
These are not skills I learned in my formal education at all. If I had to rate the value of my education at the University of Toronto on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 0. If I had to rate the quality of education at University of Victoria on a scale of 1 to 10, trust me, it's a 0. Don't even get me started. And I know that people are entirely capable of going through the motions of a BA, whether it's in the sciences, philosophy, or almost any other field, and learning nothing or learning remarkably close to nothing, despite the fact that even they get straight A's or even they get reasonably good grades, without really deeply picking up the course content or without learning lessons in a way that they can apply them to their own lives. The way I developed this habit of mind that I am now sharing with my girlfriend, that I'm encouraging her to think critically, as loath as I am to use that golden buzzword, critical thinking, it comes out of caring. And I know caring doesn't sound sophisticated. It doesn't sound as appealing as critical thinking. But the habit of what people call critical thought, for me, absolutely, there's no other way to put it, rises out of caring. I was in a situation when I was living in Laos. Laos is a third world country in Southeast Asia. It's just north of Cambodia. I was there, and at that time, I was trying to get into the humanitarian sector. I wasn't yet in, and I was busy doing 10 other things. And I read this report, humanitarian report on a sex scandal that involved statutory rape, teenagers getting pregnant, and humanitarian workers having sex lives that were not really commensurable with what donors thought of as humanitarian work. Okay? And this was in remote villages of northern Laos where people were still starving, not in the big city where the quality of life was much higher, where the life expectancy was a decade longer and so on, but out on the edges of the ragged edges of Lao civilization, where quality of life was still very low, and where certainly it was possible for people doing humanitarian work to reduce the local native people to a situation of prostitution, dependency, or what have you, if they didn't abide by a pretty strict moral code. There was this report put out by the agency guilty of these various transgressions. And I got to see how, sitting in a room, 30 other people who just wanted to believe the bullshit, who wanted to believe the hype, interpreted the statistics and the numbers and the facts presented in this report 100% wrong. And I was the guy who read this and got it right. And just like these examples I mentioned, just like stopping on, wait, what does that sentence mean? Stop, really think about it. Why did the author put this in here, and why is it phrased this way? Because sometimes people are writing under constraints. I mean, I can remember in that report, which was supposed to be counting the number of accidental pregnancies, see the link to this research talking about this video, suppose we counted the number of accidental pregnancies that arose between humanitarian workers and barefoot teenagers in these poverty-stricken villages. I've been in those villages, by the way. People were literally barefoot there. I'm not joking. Anyway, in trying to measure this, you just get one sentence that said, in addition to the cases listed in the table, several others were omitted for the following reasons. And you'd have to take that sentence and say, no. This report was supposed to count the number of pregnancies, and instead there's an unspecified number that were omitted, and it's plural. It's at least 2. It's at least 2 or 3. We don't know. It could be 10, and they've been omitted for these reasons. Statements like that. Nobody taught me how to do this. Nobody. Not my university, not my parents. Nothing in my upbringing taught me how to do this. But whether I was reading ancient Buddhist philosophy or completely modern secular political science, I've got to say, what other people call critical thinking, I call caring. And this is why, in a sense, encouragement is even more important than education. Hey, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with your work. You should care. And that's really what I'm trying to share with Melissa. And obviously, living parallel lives on the other side of the world, you got James Aspey teaching Vipassana meditation to people, living his reckless, brainless, hippie lifestyle in the shadow of his, 7-year drug habit and all these other things that have reduced his cognitive capacity to the level of a shaven ape. And, he's obviously encouraging her to play the ukulele and act like a bimbo and sell this kind of hippie pseudoscience soft medicine. In a context like this, where you're talking about endorsing a dubious form of birth control, not approved by the FDA as a form of birth control, that's in the video, next few minutes, that's to follow, there's a real question of what kind of thinking is being encouraged. Now, the moral of this story, I think, is worth telling in setting up this video, partly because veganism itself so much comes out of an ethos of care, of saying to people, why don't you care? I care. These are the facts. But the facts alone are inert and meaningless. I need you to care. I need you to look in the mirror and question, why don't you care about what's on your plate, what's on your fork, and what the knock-on ecological effects are, right? But all over the world, whether it's the consequences of U.S. foreign policy, of dropping bombs on a foreign country, or it's the consequences of flushing your toilet. Where does your sewage go? What are the ecological impacts of that? There's nothing innate within us about caring about the consequences of our action, or caring enough to read a report, to read a document, and to really stop, to check if you understand what you're saying, to check if the author understands what they're saying, to really just care about the content. Again, even at that first step of reading, let alone the next step of coming here on the internet and then sharing those recommendations with others.
It will never give you a green day unless it's 99.4% sure that you are not fertile that day. So that's actually even more safe than the birth control pill in terms of preventing pregnancy. And that 99.4% statistic is backed by 2 clinical trials that are in peer-reviewed medical journals, as well as 30 years of research. So I really did my research before trying out the Daisy, and this is such a reputable company.
The scope of my last video on this topic was very broad, so I'm making a follow-up video now to narrow in on just the Daisy specifically. I didn't emphasize enough in my prior video that there was an important research article published which, in the harshest terms possible, calls the Daisy study fraudulent and appeals for it to be redacted. Carly, you should know better than to promote a product from a company who has promoted itself on fraudulent efficacy rates. You say that you have a bachelor's of science in biochemistry. You say that you did the research. You didn't research well enough. You weren't critical enough. Carly, I feel like with a bachelor's of science in biochemistry, you could be doing more for the movement than recording videos of yourself hugging puppies or singing Over the Rainbow. Come on, Carly. This is about sex. This is about pregnancy. It's not about puppies or rainbows. You need to take responsibility. Just because you're cute doesn't mean that you can support a product and endorse a product publicly that could lead to unintended pregnancies. I think you should take down your videos gushing about the daisy. They've been dishonest in their marketing claims, and they've used statistics that are based on bad science to push their products. I hope that by the end of this video you can see that there are legit researchers who have gone into this themselves. I hope that by the end of this video you can realize that the daisy is a scam. I hope that you can realize that the daisy is basically just an overpriced thermometer. Don't trust this product. Don't buy this product. This is a tweet from Chelsea B. Paulus, PhD. She says, "It wasn't a clinical trial. It was a poorly worded retrospective mailed survey with a low response rate. And beyond the poor data, the analysis was done incorrectly. A responsible company would stop promoting misleading information and thereby would stop putting people at risk of unintended pregnancy." This screenshot is from the Daisy's website and their terms and conditions. I'm just going to read a couple parts, but this is the general disclaimer for the Daisy device. They say, Daisy is a fertility monitor and not FDA approved as a contraceptive method or device. We do not accept liability for claims made by the manufacturer or other material resources. I did include a link to this study in the description box below, but I thought I would go through it and read out some of the most important parts. So the study is titled Published Analysis of Contraceptive Effectiveness of Daisy and DaisyView App is Fatally Flawed, and it was published by Chelsea B. Paulus. The background of the study reads, in March 2018, Dr. Martin C. Koch and colleagues published an analysis purporting to measure the effectiveness of the Daisy device and DaisyView app for the prevention of unintended pregnancy. Unfortunately, the analysis was flawed in multiple ways, which render the estimates unreliable. Unreliable estimates of contraceptive effectiveness can endanger public health. The main body reads, this commentary details multiple concerns pertaining to the collection and analysis of data in Koch and Associates 2018. A key concern pertains to the inappropriate exclusion of all women with fewer than 13 cycles of use from the Pearl Index calculations, which has no basis in standard effectiveness calculations. I included parts from a webinar that Chelsea Paulus and a gynecologist have recorded, so that's later in this video, and in that they discuss why a research study such as this can't actually use the statistics to calculate a Pearl Index. It's because it's a retrospective study that any Pearl Index calculation, any perfect use calculation, really can't be made from this type of research. Okay, so I continue. Multiple additional methodological concerns, as well as prior attempts to directly convey concerns to the manufacturer regarding marketing materials based on prior inaccurate analyses, are also discussed. In the conclusion, she says, the Koch and Associates 2018 publication produced unreliable estimates of contraceptive effectiveness for the Daisy device and DaisyView app, which are likely substantially higher than the actual contraceptive effectiveness of the device and app. Those estimates are being used in marketing materials which may inappropriately inflate consumer confidence and leave consumers more vulnerable than expected to the risk of unintended pregnancy. Prior attempts to directly convey concerns to the manufacturer of this device were unsuccessful in preventing publication of subsequent inaccurate analyses. To protect public health, concerns with this analysis should be documented in the published literature. The Koch and Associates 2018 analysis should be retracted, and marketing materials on contraceptive effectiveness should be subjected to appropriate oversight. So, as I said, in the harshest terms possible, in a formal research article, they condemn Daisy and say that their study was fraudulent and could lead to unintended pregnancy, and that it's a public health concern. So, in the background section of this article, I think this is rather important. So this commentary argues that this paper merits retraction given the demonstrated potential for these estimates to be used in marketing materials, leading to public confusion about the actual contraceptive effectiveness of the Daisy device and DaisyView app. The manufacturer of Daisy has cited this study, the 2018 study, in contraceptive effectiveness claims in marketing materials. And in Figure 1, you can see that they have used this on their Facebook page for the Daisy Fertility Monitor. They say that now, with the release of our new clinical trial, we have shown that Daisy, when used in combination with the DaisyView app, is even more effective, 99.4%. So in the main text, the author says that the Cook and Associates 2018 effectiveness estimates are fatally flawed and unreliable for multiple reasons. First, their Pearl Index calculations are void of meaning, since the authors inappropriately excluded from the Pearl Index calculations all women with fewer than 13 cycles of use, ignoring cycle and pregnancy information from the majority of study participants. This approach has no basis in standard effectiveness estimation approaches and would severely underestimate unintended pregnancy rates by inappropriately excluding women who may be at greatest risk of unintended pregnancy. There was a table in the study from 2018 which suggested that at least 10 pregnancies occurred to women with fewer than 13 cycles, but these pregnancies were not included in the Pearl Index calculations. So the calculations were flawed because they didn't include these pretty critical pregnancies. In addition, the investigators did not prospectively collect information regarding perfect or imperfect use of the method for each cycle. Instead, they asked about overall perfect or imperfect use with a retrospective survey. This precludes their ability to correctly calculate perfect use unintended pregnancy rates in either the Pearl Index or Life Table calculations. They are not comparable to correctly estimated perfect use pregnancy rates for other contraceptive methods in other studies. So the author says that even if the inappropriate exclusion of pregnancies were corrected, the underlying data remain unreliable given the weak approach to pregnancy ascertainment. If the criteria for examining the temperature/device use data were premised upon the woman self-reporting an unwanted pregnancy on the survey, an unknown number of pregnancies may have been excluded, given that unwanted pregnancies, including those ending in abortion, may be underreported. Furthermore, the survey question asked women to report unwanted pregnancies occurring during DAISY use. The term unwanted is not synonymous with unintended, and it is unclear how women may have interpreted this question, but standard contraceptive effectiveness estimates include all unintended pregnancies, including mistimed and unwanted pregnancies. Underascertainment of unintended pregnancies could lead to inflated estimates of contraceptive effectiveness. Several other aspects of the questionnaire also raise concern. For example, a survey question presumably intended to ascertain if, at baseline, DAISY was being used to avoid or attempt pregnancy offered the following response options: A, to avoid a pregnancy, B, for family planning, or C, both. However, response options A and B, and therefore also C, are poorly distinguished and likely to be perceived synonymously by some respondents, meaning that even this already limited measure of baseline pregnancy intentions is unreliable. While some issues in data collection and analysis are not unique to this study, they nonetheless raise additional concern about the accuracy of the estimates. For example, no inclusion/exclusion criteria were described to ensure that the analytic population was at meaningful risk of pregnancy. Also, the majority of surveyed respondents reported concurrent use of contraceptive methods in addition to DAISY. The potential confounding effect of use of other methods on the effectiveness estimates is not addressed in the analysis. So when DAISY claims that just using DAISY alone is 99.4% effective, they are in effect using fraudulent science, because when they did this study, they also had women who were participating who used other contraceptive methods in addition to just the DAISY. So they really can't make that claim that the DAISY by itself is 99.4% effective. For these reasons, this analysis produced estimates which cannot be understood as reflective of the true and still unknown contraceptive effectiveness of the DAISY device and DAISY View app. Our forthcoming systematic review of studies assessing the effectiveness of various fertility awareness-based methods carefully considers the quality of prospective studies on effectiveness of various FABMs. Studies of extremely poor quality, such as those in the Cook and Associates 2018 study, must not be understood as providing reliable evidence on contraceptive effectiveness. The manufacturer of the DAISY device, Valley Electronics, has made inaccurate marketing statements in the past, based on previously published analyses which purported to assess contraceptive effectiveness of their products, but which also contained fatal flaws. So you can see that this is the DAISY USA Twitter page, and this is the kind of marketing that they use. They say that the DAISY is just as effective as the Paragard, the non-hormonal copper IUD. In their marketing, DAISY used the 99.3% effectiveness rate here, and this is from a study that also is fatally flawed. In the study, she says, For example, in addition to multiple concerns pertaining to the methods of pregnancy ascertainment in Freundel 1998, which was collected via a mailed retrospective questionnaire, the calculation, which generated a 0.7 perfect use Pearl index, used an incorrect denominator which included all cycles rather than only cycles of perfect use, which would inflate perfect use effectiveness rates. On the Daisy Fertility Monitor Facebook page, somebody asks, how can we make Daisy more effective by tracking other fertility signs, parentheses, cervical fluid and cervical position, on our own? And Daisy Fertility Monitor responds to this person saying, Daisy is currently 99.4% effective used alone. This 99.4% effectiveness rating is based off of this 2018 study, which is fatally flawed. Okay, finally, the conclusions. The scientific and reproductive health communities have a responsibility to protect public health by ensuring that inaccurately conducted analyses of contraceptive effectiveness do not put unsuspecting consumers at a greater than expected risk of experiencing an unintended pregnancy. Women and couples interested in using any form of contraception, including an FABM such as Daisy, deserve robust effectiveness data on which to base their contraceptive decisions. Unfortunately, the 2018 study from Koch and Associates, their estimates are fatally flawed and inaccurate, and are likely to be substantially higher than the actual contraceptive effectiveness of the device and app. By using marketing language based on inaccurate analyses, Valley Electronics falsely increases consumer confidence in the effectiveness of the Daisy device and the Daisy View app, which could endanger the well-being of their customers. To protect public health, scientific integrity, and potential customers, these concerns should be documented in the published literature. The Koch and Associates 2018 analysis should be retracted, and marketing materials on contraceptive effectiveness should be subjected to appropriate oversight. This issue isn't discussed in Chelsea Paulus's paper, but I thought I would mention this issue. So in the general disclaimer on Daisy's website, they say that conclusions regarding the contraceptive reliability of monitoring basal body temperature are based upon independent studies. But if you look at the bottom of the 2018 study, in the section that says competing interests, it says, we have read and understood BMJ policy on declaration of interests and declare the following interests. This study was funded by the Valley Electronics AG Zurich, Switzerland. NVDR is an internal scientist and employee of the company. NVDR analyzed the stored data. So this is pretty damning and a pretty important conflict of interest to be noting about this study. So I'm going to end this video with edited clips from a webinar from Chelsea B. Paulus and Dr. Rachel Urrutia. Their presentation was called Effectiveness of Fertility Awareness-Based Methods for Pregnancy Prevention. And in this, they discuss their scientific study in which they really comprehensively went through all the research available, and they talk about the actual effectiveness rates of all the available fertility awareness-based methods on the market or that you can use in your everyday life. It is notable that in their research, they didn't include any studies about the Daisy or any studies from Valley Electronics.
Dr. Chelsea Paulus is a reproductive health epidemiologist and senior research scientist at the Guttmacher Institute. She has extensive experience in research on contraception and has conducted multiple studies pertaining to contraceptive effectiveness, safety, and susceptibility for a range of contraceptive methods. Dr. Paulus recently completed an analysis assessing how use of multiple contraceptive methods, such as how use of FABMs in conjunction with barrier methods during the fertile window, impacts the estimation of FABM prevalence in the United States. Along with Dr. Victoria Jennings of the Institute for Reproductive Health, Dr. Paulus wrote the chapter on fertility awareness-based methods in the upcoming edition of Contraceptive Technology. She's also organized a panel presentation on FABMs at the 2017 North American Forum on Family Planning and has presented on FABMs to global audiences. She is a member of the Scientific Subcommittee for the Association of Fertility Awareness Professionals and serves as a guest lecturer on scientific literacy to students of fertility awareness education programs. Dr. Rachel Urrutia is board certified in obstetrics and gynecology as well as preventative medicine. She grew up in New England, completed her MD at Harvard Medical School, and moved to North Carolina for her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Duke University. She has been an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and does her clinical work at Reply, OBGYN, and Fertility, which has a practice focused on promoting access to fertility awareness-based methods. Her research is focused on using women's health visits as an opportunity to prevent chronic disease and on the use and effectiveness of FABMs for avoiding pregnancies. She is also a certified instructor of the Sensiplan fertility awareness-based methods.
Substantial confusion exists on the effectiveness of FABMs for preventing pregnancy, so we wanted to devote a full webinar to this specific topic. Let's move on to discussing what kinds of studies can be used to estimate contraceptive effectiveness. Two different study designs can estimate contraceptive effectiveness. One advantage of prospective studies is that investigators can collect detailed information on contraceptive use and how it changes over time, and on information on outcomes like pregnancies. So prospective studies can sometimes even perform repeated pregnancy tests on women, and this is a more reliable way of ascertaining if an unintended pregnancy has occurred, more reliable than asking women to self-report their pregnancies. Also, prospective studies are the only design that enable calculation of perfect use effectiveness estimates. However, a major disadvantage is that estimates from retrospective surveys depend on accurate recall and reporting of detailed contraceptive and pregnancy history by participants. And we know that underreporting of important events like unintended pregnancies or abortion is common. Also, if a method is not commonly used in the general population, it may be difficult to have enough information to generate stable effectiveness estimates for that method. And finally, researchers cannot estimate perfect use effectiveness from retrospective surveys. This type of study design can only provide typical use estimates.
To summarize the best available data from prospective studies on FABM effectiveness for pregnancy prevention, we conducted a systematic review. To our knowledge, this is the most comprehensive review that has been conducted on the topic. Our manuscript is currently in press and should be available in August of 2018. We reviewed over 8,000 titles and abstracts, over 400 full-text articles, and ultimately included 74 articles, which represented 53 unique cohorts. We did not identify any studies that we considered to be high quality. We decided at the beginning of our analysis that we would not present the effectiveness estimates from low-quality studies. We had significant concern that these estimates were not accurate given serious problems with the way the data was collected and or analyzed. Looking at the middle column, you can see that there were 21 moderate quality studies, and these will be the focus of the estimates that I present in the following slides. Two examples of basal body temperature-based methods are BioSelf and natural cycles. We identified one low quality and one moderate quality study of BioSelf. The moderate quality study generated a typical use pregnancy probability of 9 per 100 women years and no correctly calculated perfect use estimate. There was one moderate quality study of natural cycles, and the most conservative estimate from this study, which we determined to be the most reliable estimate, generated a typical use pregnancy rate of 9.8 per 100 woman years. Correctly calculated perfect use probabilities were not available at the time of the literature search, though a publication with a perfect use estimate was subsequently published. In addition, there were 4 other basal body temperature-based method studies of a variety of different methods, and the effectiveness estimates will not be described for these methods because they were all low-quality studies.
No studies on the DAISY or any other devices from Valley Electronics were included in their comprehensive study. This means that there are no high-quality, moderate quality, or low-quality studies done on the DAISY.
The Sensiplan and Marquette monitor-based studies demonstrate the lowest probabilities of unintended pregnancies and may potentially be the most effective fertility awareness-based methods. However, this is based on a small number of moderate quality studies in specific populations, and so more evidence would be needed to state this confidently. Very few studies accurately calculated perfect use effectiveness estimates. However, the lowest perfect use estimates were again for Sensiplan and the Marquette monitor, both having less than 1% pregnancy rates or probabilities among perfect use cycles. There's a suggestion that some FABMs may have promising perfect use pregnancy rates. However, FABMs in general are highly dependent on the consistency
and correctness of use. More data would be required to confirm these estimates. So users of FABM should be informed about the known effectiveness estimates or the lack of effectiveness estimates for the specific FABM they are using, and they should be advised not to extrapolate from effectiveness estimates from different FABM methods.
In other words, you cannot infer that the DAISY is just as effective as Census Plan. You cannot infer that DAISY has the same effectiveness as natural cycles.
So this table includes an overall estimate of typical use for FABMs of 15%. This estimate primarily reflects people who report using the rhythm method, since the majority of women in the United States who report using an FABM report using specifically rhythm. Since this 15% estimate is based on a retrospective survey, as we noted before, calculating perfect use is not possible. So that's why there's no perfect use in that column. Estimates from the prospective studies are in purple, and these should be considered best-case scenarios and may not be generalizable to all populations. In our systematic review, we did not identify any high-quality prospective studies on any FABM method. Again, estimates from prospective studies should be considered best-case scenarios and may not be generalizable to broader populations. Overall, while some data are available on the effectiveness of individual FABMs, understanding the true effectiveness of each unique FABM would require data from high-quality studies.